Welcome to this week's edition of Two Men in the Middle, where two men in the middle of the Midwest pontificate about news, current events, politics, and everything in between. I'm Brandon Kinnig.
I'm Craig Huey.
Craig, today is a Trump show, everything Trump. Bombshell verdict in the Trump fraud trial out of New York today. Trump found guilty of all 34 counts, 11 hours of deliberation by the jury, very quick arrival at a verdict. I'll say it was quicker than I suspected, and I was starting to get concerned it would be a hung jury, which would drag this out even further. That was not the case. That was not the case. So let's digest what happened today. I mean, this is a new precedent in American history with a convicted felon former president.
Were you watching CNN or MSNBC or anything in the background?
I was watching CNN here and there, yeah.
CNN, did you see they had the counter for the 34 counts? So as they read them off, they just counted higher. Again, depending on where you get your news is going to, I think, depend on a lot of how you look at this. If you look at this case, if you're the Fox News, the ACN, the News Nation crowd, this is the biggest travesty of justice that has ever occurred. And for 6 weeks, you've seen Jonathan Turley and Andrew McCarthy, Trey Gowdy, and other members of their legal team tell you this is an absolute travesty of justice. The charges do not exist. This is a shoehorn of a state crime into a federal one, and this is probably the worst thing that's ever happened to the United States and to the criminal justice system. If you go with MSNBC, CNN, you get a much more pro-prosecution, let's say, delivery of this story. These charges are legit. They explain them a little bit better, and they talk in terms more of what the prosecution is presenting more than what Fox and the other ones that just focus on that the novelty of this case, the turning the state into the federal. Right. That's where your attention should lie.
They focus on the novelty of the charges themselves. These have not been along for that long. It's complex legally.
So they're focused on all of that, and MSNBC and CNN is focusing you on what a bad guy Trump is. And look at all of these people like David Pecker and Cohn and all these other folks who have just said over and over again all the scummy stuff Trump has done.
But at the end of the day, there are some basics here. And one of those is these are legitimate charges. Trump was convicted by a jury unanimously. And, so you can't get past some of those guardrails, which, again, we've always upheld in our jurisprudence and in our legal system that, trial by jury, having a well-defined trial process, all of that happened. And so, the case is we know that Trump is going to appeal this.
Yeah.
But, the question then becomes on what grounds does he appeal? Because usually there has to be some significant denial of right at trial or egregious decision by a judge or, something of that circumstance to have grounds for an appeal.
So if you listen to like Hugh Hewitt and Andrew McCarthy, they're going to lay out an entire list of things that the judge did that they're put into the appeal mistake category. The instructions that they gave to the jury, for example, that's what so far is like the number one thing on appeal. Apparently, the judge told them that they didn't all have to be unanimous across all of these charges. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's something specific to New York law. Another ground of appeal. What was the federal charge? This is, again, depending on where you watched your news or info about this trial, Fox made this sound like this was the cornerstone of the travesty of justice. There was a state records law that was broken around logging campaign expenses, and then they shoehorned that into a federal charge. What was the federal charge? According to Fox News, that has never been laid out and has never been identified. I find that highly suspect, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know how this is handled in law. So part of this is because New York law is confusing around stating the actual charge. I don't know if that's something that can be appealed or not. If you listen to Fox, this should be appealed immediately, and there's a 1,000% chance this is overturned on appeal.
Yeah.
If that's true or not, I have no clue.
Yeah, I would say from everything I've read, I think that's unlikely. There is a possibility of appeal. I don't think it's anywhere near that. And then the question is, would there be any appeal? I mean, I don't know how quickly appeals work in New York State. I mean, would this even...
They're saying it's not going to happen in 2025.
Okay, so we're looking...
Yeah, or it would happen in 2025.
2025, yeah.
It's not going to happen.
It's
not going to happen this calendar year.
Not before the election.
And there's some weird way that you might be able to shoehorn this to the Supreme Court. I doubt that's going to happen. So July 11th, he gets sentenced. That's 4 days before the Republican National Convention. Right. I have no clue what the sentence on this should be. Trump is not going to go to jail, nor should he go to jail. So what does that leave? Probation? You got to house arrest him for what? Brandon, if you were Judge Merchan, who is, again, either the biggest legal idiot to ever sit on a bench or, Jesus himself on the bench, what is a fair punishment for this?
Well, I will say if you go back during the duration of this trial, at every step of the way, Trump, acted out against the judge. He violated the prohibition against speaking ill about the judge, about
he violated the gag order constantly.
Constantly. I mean, and, he never actually faced jail time for any of this, although in normal circumstances, a normal person would not have been given that many chances. Yeah. So I don't think he'll get jail time either, but I think there'll be something in between from probation to house arrest.
Do you think they'll try to restrict his movements? Do you think he's going to get 30 days, 60 days house arrest?
What's the minimum you can get for house arrest? Is that 30 days?
I don't know if the judge has complete leeway on this. I don't know if he starts down a path, then suddenly sentence guidelines kick in and his hands are tied.
Like a couple weeks? I mean, if
and
I could see him getting a minimum.
What good is it to slap an ankle monitor on Trump and make him stay in New York for 2 weeks or whatever?
Well, I mean, there has to be some type of, punishment to fit the conviction. So that's the thing. What is that? It has to be something.
I'm sure there's a fine that they could put on, and they'll probably max that. They'll probably max that out. But what do you do now is a whole.
And the issue, though, with fines, with people like Trump, those don't really make a difference. I mean, those are, it's not like fining a middle-class person.
Yeah, right. Just raise money off of it. So what should happen? What should Trump's punishment be for being found guilty of this? My guess is he's going to get 4 to 5 years of probation, a bunch of community service, and he's going to be required to do some things that's going to take him off the campaign trail for a couple weeks between now and November. That's going to be my guess of what that's going to be.
Yeah, I think that's likely. I'm not familiar with New York law, so I don't know the minimum for a house arrest component. I mean, if there was...
Maybe they have one of those high-impact incarceration programs, they send teenagers out through the woods and stuff, and they learn confidence by, doing rope climbs and shit like that.
Can you imagine?
Maybe there's some blue-collar or white collar version
of that for Trump, yeah,
that they could do Trump through. That might be funny. I don't. Now we're getting to the point where, okay, so we did this. Now what? What do we do next with this guy? I don't know. I think people prepare to be disappointed in the sentence phase of this because I don't think the sentence is going to be much, and nor should it.
Although I think expectations from the very beginning has always been that this is the weakest of all the cases.
Yes.
This was going to have the weakest sentence as well. This isn't comparable to the documents case where Trump could go to jail for the rest of his life, in that case, or at the January 6th case. I mean, those cases could inevitably result in a lot of jail time for Trump if we were at the point that those were being tried. So I think that's a difference. But no, I think people just need to have, low expectations of what's going to come out of this and realize that at the end of the day, the jury agreed that Trump had acted fraudulently in trying to conceal a hush money payment, pass it off as a political donation, and keep the information from getting out to the public prior to the election. All of that did happen. The jury felt that it was compelling enough based on the explanation of the law provided by the prosecutor that law was broken by this conduct. And so what it does tell you is that at the very least that there was wrongdoing and there was an intent to fraud and to conceal that occurred, whether or not you agree that the law was the mechanism to derive a conviction out of this. And people then have to know from this point forward, are you willing to vote for a convicted felon who was convicted by a jury in Manhattan and re-elect him to the highest office in the land? That's the question before them.
If I'm Trump's attorney, I in my press conference tonight, I say all the time I've been saying two-tier system of justice and that this is wrong, and Trump cannot get a fair trial in New York or D.C., and this just absolutely proves my point. They took a state paperwork charge that was 5 years past the statute of limitations. They made some sort of special dispensation to resurrect this case. Then they, in a new legal theory that has never been done before, shoehorned a state misdemeanor into a federal felony that they can't really explain to you what the crime is. And it took the good citizens of New York less than 12 hours to find him guilty on all 34 counts. So one of the things I think is painfully obvious for Trump right now, and I'm not saying this is bad because he's done this to himself, Trump is never going to get A-list legal talent because he doesn't pay and he's a terrible, terrible customer.
But he doesn't listen to the advice of his attorneys.
According to a lot of the legal experts, a lot of what their attorneys did was specific to appease Trump. It wasn't the greatest legal strategy in court to do, but it was things that Trump needed on the record. For example, Trump still contains he didn't have sex with Stormy Daniels. Well, that's just dumb.
Yeah.
That's nobody doesn't.
I mean, he says the same about
that.
Karen McDougal and the many others who, have come forward.
And it seems like this case for the jury, and I can understand this just as a citizen of the United States, really kind of turned at the beginning with all that information from David Pecker and the National Enquirer. The catch and kill stuff.
That was the strongest evidence in this case.
I think that's when that was the lead, and then when Cohn came in and kind of colored in the lines to what that actually meant, I think that's where a lot of the jury said, this is scummy enough behavior for me that I'll let the legal folks work out how these two things connect, but I'm going to go ahead and vote guilty on this.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of that behavior. I mean, it was pretty clear cut, like what happened. I mean, we had audio tapes. The payoff, the campaign contribution, and so it's a whole separate debate of whether or not that should be folded into a federal charge, but misrepresenting any type of payment as a campaign contribution when it clearly isn't is on its face wrong.
Sure.
And so I think at a basic level, the jurors could wrap themselves around that. They could understand that. And then I think you add in just the conspiracy element, because that is really what the prosecution spent a lot of time trying to build this case, that there was a conspiracy with the audio recordings, with the fact that all these people are involved, that there was this back and forth, there were all these side conversations happening, that and there was no way possible that Trump could not know about this.
No.
And so he can't claim ignorance, and that this was just people around him acting on their own.
Once again, Trump is like every other CEO, rich business person I've ever met. He sits on top of allegedly this empire worth billions of dollars, and he's making minute decisions. Every little money decision has to come across his desk.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what clipped Trump. If he'd had somebody that just would have handled this for him, he could have literally said, I have no idea what's happening, and had some plausible deniability. I think what really got him and what his sin is that he is in the middle of everything he does, even if what he's doing is running right up to the line.
I mean, he's a micromanager.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Even to his criminality, he's a micromanager.
Well, exactly. And what was her name, who worked for Trump, who came forward as a witness? Hope Hicks.
Hope Hicks, yeah, the one, the crier.
So her testimony established that the fact that he would involve himself in all of this minutia with employees under him that had nothing to do with the running of the business, that he was that involved constantly in the goings on of the Trump organization, which was to paint to the jury, like, again, he doesn't just, kind of sit here and think big picture, big vision. He's not that type of person.
What are your thoughts on Trump is the only person in the country that New York would have taken to court on this? No other person would have been charged with this crime. Do you think there's any validity to that?
I don't know. I need to go back into look at past articles about this, because has it been established that nobody else has been charged under this? Is this?
I think this is
this novel and that it's completely new?
I've heard this is completely new. I've heard New York has done this multiple times. I don't know.
And I would need to look at that. I mean, because it could be novel from the standpoint that it's not used often at all, or seldom. But I don't know if this. I have a hard time believing this is the first time that this would be used.
Brandon, you are accused of embezzling at your company. Okay, I'm trying to work this analogy here. I'm trying to work the analogy of you get in trouble somehow. This probably works better if I got in trouble in this scenario. But you get in trouble, you go in front of a judge, and the judge has donated to a cause that you're absolutely adamantly against. I'm trying to draw the parallel that how would you feel if you landed in front of a New York judge and the first piece of evidence that you found out about the judge is that he max donated to your political opponent? And then you find out his daughter is a political operative who is an activist for Democratic candidates. Brandon, if this were you, if you had 5 years in jail on the line and a $200,000 penalty for some sort of crime that you had done, some sort of white-collar-ish crime, do you think that would make you feel like the system isn't fair? If those were the conditions?
I mean, I would definitely be concerned and have anxiety about the outcome, Yeah,
I'm trying to prep people for if this gets overruled, there's whole lots of areas that to overrule on.
But I don't know. The one thing I would say there is I don't know if it can be overruled solely on the basis of a judge's political connections, especially because most judges have political connections of one time or another, or their ideology, background, support of...
Even if the defendant is the current Republican nominee for the president of the United States, that's not a special circumstance in that?
I mean, but then, if we're going to... Do we vet judges based on, who they've supported, who they've given to? That's whenever a candidate comes before
Can you
them.
only try Trump in a county he won? That's what Trump seems to think.
Yeah. Change the jurisdiction based on, a red state.
It brings in all of the questions that a lot of the conservative legal community has been bringing up that all of us just roundly ignore. What do you do? What is the end game here? When you start peeling this layer back, okay, so the guy who is the Republican nominee for the president of the United States in court, and his judge donated to his opponent. To me, that should be an automatic, we need another judge. Or a member of your family is so active in politics that they've worked on the staff of, to me, that's a no-brainer. You need another judge. Am I off in the weeds here?
That's where I part ways, because I think if you start getting into members of the family, that becomes a very dicey position, because, where does it stop? Because you're likely to find any person who has members of their family that disagree politically, and then it becomes very difficult to then find a judge who's suitable for a case. It's not that unlike the argument being made right now about the Supreme Court, when Supreme Court spouses take up activism for a candidate, should that be allowed, not allowed? Should that Supreme Court justice still be able to decide cases involving that candidate's election claims?
Everybody on my team seems pretty fired up that guy needs to recuse himself, right? Same logic applies to Bershon and Trump, and nobody seems to think that he should recuse himself.
Right. Well, and again, you have the conservatives on opposite sides in both those cases, thinking Alito should stay, but Judge Marchand should recuse himself. Yes. So yeah, what is the line, and where do we find consistency? Because there isn't any.
And why are judges allowed to make political contributions? I don't understand that at all. And just because the law says you can, why in the world, if I'm a fucking judge, the last thing I want to do is do anything in my personal life that could be seen as being, bias in my professional life. So I don't even understand why they let judges contribute.
Well, and we have 8 states where on the state level, judges are directly elected. Yeah. So they get contributions, they get PAC money, so I mean, how, and I haven't really dived into this in any large degree or fashion, but I'd be curious to see those judges that do get elected at the state level in places like Wisconsin for the state Supreme Court, other places, how do they oversee cases that may involve a corporation that donated to their campaign or a party that
let's take a practical example. Judge McAfee in Georgia, who's on the case down there, he just ran a primary and just won. He just won his primary in a landslide.
Yeah.
So if I'm Judge McAfee, I interpret that as the people that I have to please to retain my job are happy with my performance.
Right.
Which means they want more Donald Trump trial stuff, right? I mean, I guess Trump has a point. The idea that the judge did not step away when he is this politically involved might be problematic to the appeals court.
It could be. I do think that's where it needs to be tied to conduct in court, actual action the judge took or didn't take that irreparably harmed Trump to some degree. And I don't know that they're going to be able to make that case. And that's, I think, ultimately going to be the issue. I think step one is being able to say, hey, he received these contributions. He clearly is ideological, is on the record opposed to Trump via these contributions. How did it play out in court in terms of where was Trump harmed? Where did he not get his due process? Where did his defense not get an opportunity to present their side or to cross-examine a witness? I think that's where it gets into the details, and so that has to be established.
And do you think Trump will sit a load sometime tonight and the realization will hit him? One of the problems I have in all these court cases is I cannot get top-rate legal talent. I'm not going to pay for it. I don't participate in the way they want me to, and it's just not going to happen. So,
right. Well, he can not only not get them, but then he can't retain them. I mean, look at how many times his lawyers have left. It's a revolving door in terms of his ability to retain attorneys.
This guy Blanche, I mean, everything I heard, even off the Fox and the conservative people, were like, this guy just screwed the pooch multiple times.
Yeah.
Putting on Bob Costello so he could specifically piss off the judge. Nobody understood what was.
Yeah, that was just crazy. I can't believe that they thought that was good strategy to do that.
Another point of appeal, and again, Hugh Hewitt's my source of knowledge on this. Hugh's big time mad about this. Is the dude from the Federal Election Commission, Brad something or the other, who was going to explain that there's no crime here, basically, was the theory of him testifying. Judge didn't allow him to testify. So there's all kinds of things, the rulings that the judge made across the spectrum of this court that Trump can lean into when this case gets to.
And he was a defense witness?
Yeah, he was defense witness. And again, I know nothing about being a lawyer. All this comes from folks that I've heard or listened to. One guy who I listened to went on Fox and was adamant as a defense attorney, unless you have like a star on point, this is my witness that proves my alibi or whatever it is, you don't put on witnesses you don't have to. And then one of the big killers to Trump was when they put on the one witness, and that one witness was Costello. That was unneeded, unnecessary, and his confrontation with the judge just absolutely pushed people over the edge, is the general assessment of that.
Well, and overall, I mean, his testimony, didn't help Trump. I mean, it just, because again, I think on cross-examination, Costello, he was just blasted. And I mean, I think in terms of the conspiracy, trying to get Cohen, to be in the fold and get him as a client and then not. I mean, it cast doubts on his credibility. So if your idea was to poke holes solely in Michael Cohen's credibility, you don't do that by then exposing your own witnesses' credibility at the same time, because then that just it becomes. There's nobody wins at that point. I mean, it's neutral. There's no. What the jury takes away from that is that you're not able to present a credible witness.
Well, if I'm on the jury too, we're getting out of here by Friday, right? This isn't stretching on more than 3 days because, number one, I am not risking getting my identity getting out and having to move out of the city for this lunatic.
Can you imagine? Ugh.
And I don't know if that, again, I don't know if that's what happened on the jury. But I'm saying if I were sitting there, this would be my opening.
Right.
Hey, guys, we got 3 days to get this done. It looks pretty clear cut. I mean, it only took 11 hours. There may have been a few people that had some more questions, but I think everybody on that jury wanted to get out of there and wrap this up as quickly as they can for their own purposes before something bad happened.
Their own safety and security.
Yeah, that led to something bad.
You have to realize these are normal people too. They can't afford to hire security. They can't pay tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, that's not in the works compared to somebody who's like a public official or Do you think any of these jurors will go public now that the verdict is in? Talk to media, give their story?
I keep thinking of who was that lunatic gal in, oh, damn it. I think it was Atlanta in Georgia. Remember, there was the gal who was the head of the oh, God damn it. I'm drawing a complete blank. I've lost all my words. What's the process you go to be indicted? You take them it goes to the grand jury first.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and this woman was the head of the grand jury.
The foreman.
Yes, the foreman.
Yeah.
And she did like a 3-day speaking tour, and she was total kook job.
Yeah, this was for the Georgia case when it was getting started.
You remember this total nutty broad.
Yes.
I mean, at some point, I hope those people retain a lawyer or somebody that tells them your best move is head down. But head down and just go about your business.
But that was different. That was bad because that was before the case had started. Like she was going.
I thought it was just after or something.
Was that after? Was that?
I think it's just after they did the indictment.
Oh,
she
after
gave
the
out
indictment.
And it's like,
okay.
Wow, this gal was the head of the grand jury.
Yeah, that's right. Because it was very quickly, and she was all over the place giving interviews. And
my advice to those people: whatever money or notoriety you gain from this, it won't be worth it in the long run.
Right.
For what those people will put you through, it's not going to.
Because you then face an onslaught of public attacks and vitriol from social media, and, it's just, it's crazy.
So
Nobody wants that.
Trump has, 6 weeks, basically, from now to the Republican convention, and July 11th is his sentencing. So I think the 11th is his sentencing, the 15th-ish is the convention. Brandon, you are the campaign manager for one Donald J. Trump. We have a big meeting tomorrow. Walk me through what do the next 6 weeks look like for Trump between now and the convention, knowing you've got this sentencing now 4 days before that starts. What do you do? What's Trump's day-to-day campaign plan?
I think you try to squeeze in as many rallies as you can prior to the sentencing, knowing that your time is going to be likely hindered quite a bit for several weeks after that. You also gin up the grift machine, so you start raising money online. That includes swag that promotes the fact that you're a felon, that you got an unfair deal, that you're a victim of the deep state and the persecution that they've unleashed on you.
All your surrogates will be active because they're all going to grift off this too and use it for attention. So you got all that behind you.
So you get that jump started, and you, as far as campaign messaging, you triangulate this and say, this is why I need to be elected, because we need to turn around the two-tier justice system in this country. This is unfair. By doing this to me, they're doing this to you because they don't respect you. They don't like you. The deep state sees you as a threat. I would rehash Hillary's line about the deplorables from 2016. You make this about them, which is what Trump typically does. Anything that involves him, he makes it about his supporters and the people who believe in him, that it's an attack against them. It's, that they basically, you say, this court in New York, this runaway judge and jury, they've convicted you, and we can't let this stand. Get me back in the White House. We will right this wrong. We will go after them, which is what they want to hear. We will go after them. We will replace all of them. We will take action. And that is the message you continue to hammer and hammer.
Let's lead into that. We'll go after the message, because Trump directly and all of his minions seem to be picking up on that message more and more. Steve Bannon in this Project 2025.
Yeah, did you see the podcast?
Holy shit. If that don't scare the shit out of you.
He basically said that Trump would root out everybody in government and civil service across the agencies who opposed him, did not support him, that they will all be replaced.
Yep.
And, pretty strong words. The fact, and that they would legally go after their opponents as well, and use the power and full force of the DOJ to go after them. Yeah. So that should shock the sensibilities of all Americans, because contrary to what Trump says today, the DOJ is pursuing a wide latitude of investigations into multiple public officials on both sides of the aisle. It was the DOJ that indicted Bob Menendez, who's a Democrat.
Recently, he's fucked. He's going down.
Henry Kuehler, the Democratic congressman from Texas, who's also been indicted. So let's dispense with this notion that somehow the DOJ is just on a witch hunt against Republicans. That's clearly not the case. And other than one Republican named Donald J. Trump, a lot of the people they've gone after are Democrats.
So if I were the head of Trump's, if I was his campaign manager, sit everybody down and say, okay, we're entering into a real problematic phase of the campaign, because we lost last time because 5% of white men just got tired of the chaos that Trump created, and they chose to vote for Joe Biden. They didn't leave it blank. They voted for Joe Biden. Of those 5%, 4% of those men had college degrees, 1% did not. We lost because 5% of male Trump triers saw too much of Trump, during his presidency, and decided, I'm out. It feels like, folks, we're right back there again. And that's what the harm of this conviction really does. It paints him as a felon, but it also brings all of his supporters out of the woodwork in a way that forces these people, again, to look at Trump's crowd and say, is that me? Do I fit in with these people? Am I like... So today in New York, there was some lunatic woman who is challenging AOC in a primary. She is walking around with some banner with something printed on it, just screaming, AOC, debate me, while the shaman, I don't think it was the actual 1/6 shaman, but a fanboy of the shaman.
Oh, okay.
Is behind her doing some sort of incense ceremony to make AOC debate her or some shit like that. My point is, if I'm the campaign managers, folks, we're in a real pickle here, because for Trump's own personality and for him to get by, he needs to wrap that warm blanket of the Magna base around him for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It's all going to be rallies where he's just allowed to rant and everybody loves him.
That's what it'll be.
And all of that. But in these next 6 weeks where people are going to be maybe focused on him more than they have, what are we showing them? And what is Trump showing them?
The problem is Trump doesn't have the ability or the discipline to broaden his base and go after. So his approach and his team, his campaign team, has said from the very beginning this has been a base election. That's the way they've played this. And even if they wanted to pivot now because of the reality with this verdict, I don't think that Trump will listen. And so they will end up following his lead, which is to continue to do what they've done to continue doing what he's done so far this year, but then turn it up several notches. Just go full-blown victimhood mentality, deep state is after me.
That's what I'm saying. Rigged. All of this is going to be just horrible shit, he says.
Oh, yeah. And and how is this going to impact? It'll be interesting to see how this plays into the first debate that's coming up at the end of June 23rd?
7? Okay. Something like that.
we're less than like a month away from that now. So how does he address this during the debate? And how do the moderators, bring this up, and in what context? But I guarantee you that whatever Trump does on the debate stage will be indicative of what he's doing at his rallies. So it'll, for the general public who are not prone to seeing what he does at his rallies or do not watch it day in and day out, they'll get a taste of it from this debate.
Well, and let's lean into a little bit the idea that Trump is capable of expanding his base. And let's use his performance at the Libertarian Convention
just this last weekend
as did you see some clips of that?
I did, yeah. It was quite
just
remarkable.
Brutal. I mean, basically, Trump showed up to the Libertarian Convention, gave a standard MAGA speech, I would say. Didn't really modify
Not at all.
His presentation for the crowd. Got booed so bad that I think that was an 18-minute speech that he cut that off and left the stage to a chorus of boos.
And he doesn't handle criticism like that well. He usually plays to friendly MAGA audiences, so this was change for him. And he became belligerent and combative. Mm-hmm. He started, going after the people whose votes he was trying to win and people he was trying to pander to, saying, well, be fine with your 3% then. Go ahead if you're willing to, not have power.
And then he tries to be transactional.
Yeah.
I'll pardon the guy that you like, the founder of the
Silk Road, the Silk Road, the drug website.
And I'll put a libertarian in my cabinet.
Right.
So all he showed up was a two-tier transaction, and that's what he did.
And he thought that was enough, despite the fact that he's not a libertarian and couldn't care less about their values and ideals. And so, it did resonate because at the end of the day, libertarians are not transactional at all. These are true blue believers, and they know and they can see through what Trump was trying to do. And I think most of those libertarians knew that Trump is on the record stating he supports a death penalty for drug dealers. So to then, pander and say, oh, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pardon one
that's such a great
support
point.
This guy. Come on.
How can Trump not know that libertarians are extremely ideological and that your standard shtick is not going to work with these people?
Yeah. I mean, you can't buy their votes. You can't say, well, here, I'll do this for you. And Trump is able to do that with others, particularly when you talk about organizations that have vested lobbying interests and that are really just all about moving the needle on their pet projects. That's a little bit different. That is not the Libertarian Party. That's not the base of the Libertarian Party, who they tend to see things in no compromise. It's black and white.
Yes.
You either agree with me ideologically, you support my no government, limited government philosophy, or you don't, and we're not going to negotiate. There's no negotiation to be had.
And if you've ever wondered why the libertarians could gain no ground on the national stage, a quick glimpse into their convention really answered all of those questions. I mean, they nominate like Obi-Wan Kenobi and shit like that. They basically allow anybody there to kind of massage anything and scratch any itch that they want to. After Trump left, they passed a resolution, or I think they tried to, that said the libertarians grabbed the former president by the pussy. Ha ha ha. That's funny. But if you ever really wanted to appeal to a broad base in politics, if you watched any much of that libertarian convention, you got it answered real quick why libertarians are never a serious threat in national politics and don't look like they're ever going to be.
No, I think that's very clear. And libertarians are going through a crisis of identity right now and have been the last several years. For people that don't know, there's people and this gets very deep into the weeds, but of the Mises caucus who are very ideologically rigid in their views. And then there's a whole segment that are just very MAGA oriented, even though that contradicts much of the libertarian platform. And the MAGA people have started sweeping state libertarian parties.
Yeah.
And so if you follow any of their social media feeds, like the Missouri Libertarian Party or the Kentucky, it's like MAGA, MAGA, MAGA all the time, even though that's a complete 180 from what they believed. So the libertarians always have been a very small movement, but even right now they're being like torn into multiple pieces by the factionalism that has just risen up in the Trump years.
And I think where this ties into Trump's conviction, What we saw at that convention was Trump trying to meet the challenge of coming up with a new political shtick to people that are not part of his base.
And it was really the first time we've seen him do that.
In a long time.
Yeah, I can't recall the last time.
I can't either. And it failed miserably. And it failed miserably because of his lack of political talent. Trump has instincts politically. He knows kind of Trump knows how to make hay when the sun's shining. But he does not have the political talent to take in a new set of information and model that into a new message for people that aren't squarely behind him.
Right.
And his temperament, he showed no interest in doing that as well.
No. And I mean, once you actually mock the people whose votes you're trying to get, it's over at that point. Like there's no coming back from that.
And did he put some insane statement on Truth Social about, well, I lost your nomination, but I couldn't accept it anyway because it's against the rules of the Republican one. Did he really think he could win that party's nomination? It certainly sounded like it.
It sounded like it. I think he thinks a lot that isn't realistic or possible. But that in and of itself was a way that he tries to save face. And we see him do this constantly, right? When the facts don't square up with the reality on the ground, with what he's telling his supporters, just like outside the courthouse when he claims that there aren't throngs of supporters there daily during the trial. He's like, well, it's because they're blocking him. It's because they've blocked it off for several blocks and police won't let them through. Like, they're there. They just can't get through. Like, no, they're not there. Like,
they're physically not there.
He has to constantly find an excuse, rationalize away things that don't go his way or don't just align with the reality that he's spoon-feeding to his supporters.
Well, my idea a couple weeks ago about Trump buying the Libertarian or Green Party seems a little silly now.
Not trying to buy Greenland that time, right?
God.
As soon as you said that, I immediately started thinking of Greenland and that whole play he made trying to buy that from the Danish.
When he tried to buy Greenland. I mean, not a bad idea, I guess, maybe. I'm sure there's some natural resources there or something. I mean, Trump's a property guy. He just saw something cool and wanted to buy it.
I mean, there's a population of Danish citizens there that I think probably want
They'd love to be Americans, Brandon. Fly the flag? Come on. We're not going to talk. We're not going to have flag talk today because flag talk is getting out of control.
There's been enough of that, and
And I guess where I connect those two dots together is if that was Trump's attempt to incorporate new information into his political messaging to attract new voters, what he did at the Libertarian Convention, which I think we both agree was a complete and total fail.
Oh, yeah.
How in the world is he going to incorporate new information about his conviction and try to fashion that into a message that retains or expands his base?
I don't think he does.
Can you take a conviction and expand?
I don't think you can. I think what we'll see is it'll resemble what happened with his indictment, right? And the way he went about messaging his indictment. He'll message his conviction the same way, if not, 100 times, more in terms of intensity. But I think it's going to be the same playbook. We're not going to see anything different.
I mean, it's going to be, if they can do this to me, they can do it to you. I've heard multiple times Trump's given up so much to run for president to save the country, and look what they've just taken from him. He's just going to replay all the hits over and over.
They don't go after anybody the way they go after Trump. Yeah.
Does he do anything different this 6 weeks? Does he feel a sense of, I need to do something to shake something up? Or does he think in that way? I don't know what Trump's next 6 weeks look like.
Yeah, I don't know that he does think that way. Like maybe introducing some type of suspense into the VP audition process that he has going on.
Oh shit, I forgot about that.
I mean, that would be a chance to change the news cycle.
And he'll turn it into a show.
Oh yeah,
which he's very comfortable.
It'll be like
with.
The Apprentice, essentially. Like he'll have them beg and grovel, and he'll embarrass them and mock them. And
who's gonna take? Because the first thing you're gonna have to do is just all this is bullshit. Our whole criminal justice system is terrible. Rubio already got on Fox and gave the whole 2-tier of justice and blah 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 shit. I mean, if you take the VP job now, you really know what you're getting into.
Yeah,
it's got to be Doug Bergman.
That I would love for it to be Doug. I mean, do you know
You
how
mentioned the
hilarious it
other
would be?
week, he has money.
He has money, so he can fund Trump's campaign, get him up to par with Biden and the Democrats, and he would make for just hilarity in interviews he would give to media.
Guy.
I mean, he
just looks like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm here, and at any minute I could just leave.
Did you see the one where he was talking about how wealthy he was and like being a rich guy?
But I'm sure Trump liked that.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, and he was just so nonchalant about it, and he's like, I don't have any advantage over anybody else. I'm just super rich. Like somehow that's not an advantage.
I trust no grown man who can look at himself in the mirror every day and not say, I need to do something about these eyebrows. Right? I mean, Come on. How can you look at yourself every day and not say, every single person is looking at me thinking, what's wrong with your eyebrows?
That's a good point.
Doug Bergman has no political talent at all.
He doesn't. There's some comedic talent unintentionally, I think there.
And he blew his Achilles out, right? Playing basketball before the first thing.
I still think, I don't know, people like a Tom Cotton or a J.D. Vance are very appealing to Trump.
Yeah.
And if you look at, I don't know if he has Trump's ear, but Trump's son is a big J.D. Vance fan and is really pushing him forward for VP. And, and while Trump, I think, would like to shake things up with a woman or a minority, I think at the end of the day, he's hyper-focused on somebody who's loyal and will align with him. And he sees Pence and that betrayal in very stark terms.
He does, yeah.
And he's wanting to ensure that doesn't happen again. So I think loyalty will trump everything else.
J.D. Vance going forward is going to be a problem. If you think MAGA is a problem, then you need to keep an eye on J.D. Vance.
Yeah. I mean, he is the heir apparent to
and
Trump.
He's way smarter.
Yeah.
In some ways, way more ambitious, just as cynical, and has already proven I will do a 180 from hillbilly elegy to get to where I need to go.
He is one.
It does not matter.
I mean, we talk about how many of them do that pivot, but he is one that it's just been astounding to see, because this was somebody who was on the record against Trump in 2016 and, stood for, everything that he now disavows. I mean, it's insane to see that transformation. And he is dangerous. I mean, you're talking about a guy who is an Ivy League law school background, very smart guy. And that's where Trump has suffered, right? Because Trump has authoritarian tendencies. But Trump is not very smart. So in terms of execution, Trump is his own worst enemy. That isn't the case with somebody like J.D. Vance, who could take the MAGA creed and actually enact it and not have the same obstacles that Trump has.
Next week, I believe, is the anniversary of D-Day. Biden is going over to France, and he's going over to the same ceremony where Trump told John Kelly, everybody buried there is just a sucker for being here. What's in it for them, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's been confirmed that really happened.
Right.
I suspect Biden is going to make this a political speech when he gives it in France, and he's going to reference Trump and Trump's political problems, his legal problems, and that what he said during his presidency there and how we don't agree with that. But there's a theory that Biden's run for the presidency starts in Europe next week, and he'll start more actively campaigning, start going to the Sun Belt, which he has massive problems in Nevada, Arizona, which he's got to get to. He's going to start going to Nevada, the blue wall. So one thing to look at is what is Biden's speech overseas next week? Does he take a memorial speech for World War II and turn it into a political speech? My guess is why not? Probably.
And is it direct? Is it subtle?
Yeah.
What is the approach?
Does he just come out and call Trump a felon? Does he not mention him by name? I think that'll give us an indication.
Does he speak more generally in terms of threats to democracy and in terms of our way of life and, who act extrajudiciously and extra legally? So, yeah, there's a number of ways he could take that. So that will be remarkable to watch. Did you catch Trump's Memorial Day message, by the way?
Oh, to all the human scum out there?
Yeah. God. I mean, it was just like his Christmas Day message and his Veterans Day message and his Easter message. I mean, it is basically going after those who oppose him and woe is me.
I've spent most of this launch of the podcast shitting all over Biden and Democrats, and they 1,000% deserve it. Everything I've said about them is 100% true. They still might win because Trump has so many fatal flaws, and we're going into his biggest one now, where he's got to turn it up to 11, and he's got to stick it in everybody's face what the MAGA movement is. Right. He's got to do that to energize his base. This is his double-edged sword. The more he does that, the more the next 5% of people who said, okay, I'll try this, are going to be ready to jump
right, because he is going to simultaneously be repelling and repulsing people who are not conducive to that and do not find that attractive. And I think Biden's one saving grace, which his campaign needs to do very successfully and not get too much into the weeds on any other one area, but paint Trump as being an incumbent as well. They always talk about the advantages of incumbency being helpful. In the case of Biden, it isn't, with the way voters feel about the economy, with the way that they feel about just the general mood of the country. But you can turn that on its head by reminding voters that Trump is technically an incumbent as well, and just rewind to his 4 years in office, remind people what that was like, because this is, and that this is an election where really you have two incumbents running for office, and it's a matter of which one you want, and that voting for Trump isn't voting for change, it's voting for going back to the tumultuous 4 years we had before that voters rejected in 2020. So there's a way to finesse that message if you're Team Biden.
I'm trying to formulate how I look at the election, and this is my first attempt at it. So Biden got 80 or 81 million votes. Trump got like 73 million or something like that. So they each got, Biden got the most votes ever for anybody running for president. Trump got the most votes of any incumbent president ever. So those numbers in 2020 represent the absolute max each one of those candidates can do. And to get to those numbers, COVID rules for voting were in play. Or drop boxes, it was easier to vote in 2020, and that led to those two numbers. So let's take Biden out of the mix and just take Trump, and I think he was, 73, 74 million, right?
Yeah.
So let's say there's going to be 4 or 5 of those million that just fall away as low propensity voters that, hey, if the absolute ease of voting rules aren't here, I'm just not interested anymore. Biden will suffer the same fate. So naturally, the lack of the COVID rules in voting automatically bring the vote down. So this is where now we're at that stage where how much of Trump showing the MAGA base in the next 6 weeks with these rallies and what he has to do to get them refired and all of that, how many more of those votes now is he going to lose during that process? And where does he lose them from? And I don't think Trump is going to make huge gains with Latinos, and I don't think he's going to make huge gains with black voters.
There's also been an inversion of the typical voting paradigm for many years, many decades. The common belief was that Democrats benefited from low propensity voters, having more voters turn out than normally did. That's been flipped upside down. And based on all the recent polling, Biden does better with regular voters.
Yes.
And then when you add just all registered voters to the mix and low propensity voters, his numbers fall and Trump gains. And so that is the challenge for Trump, is ensuring that those low propensity voters still get back out this time around and don't fall off, because Trump depends on those people now more than Biden does.
And Trump cannot have huge gains with black voters and absolutely still win. Remember, a gain for Trump, he got 9% of the overall black vote last year. He bumps that to 15 to 18, probably wins.
Yeah. Same with Hispanics.
He doesn't
as well.
have to get 50 to 60%. If he gets 10 more percent of the black vote in the right places, there's a good chance he wins.
Yeah. Same with Hispanics, too.
Same with Hispanics. I've stopped hearing so much about the Latino vote going to him.
Yeah.
It seems like that's kind of like some polling, or maybe that story isn't as strong as they thought.
I think that could be, or it could be state by state. Like from what I've read, like the crosstabs, like he's faring worse with Latinos in Nevada than, for example, like Arizona. So it really kind of depends on the state. And I think that's also where pollsters kind of fall into a very misleading place when it comes to Hispanics, because Hispanics in Florida are very different than Hispanics in Texas, than in Cuba, than in California. Cuba. I was thinking of Cubans, which is why I said
we
Cuban.
should just
Cuban
annex Cuba.
Americans.
Cuba should be a state. They'd love it. It's a great vacation spot.
Exactly. It's only, 60 miles from the coast of Florida?
I think.
Something like that.
It's an easy trip. Brandon, I spent most of the week in a big blue city, Portland, and I can come back report to you. It is not a homeless hellhole. There are not homeless people littered all over the place.
Are there people that live there? Because I heard that everybody moved out of Portland.
There are people there.
Oh, okay.
The people there are strange compared to the Midwest, but there's tons of nice people there. We didn't get accosted by anybody. We didn't have any problems whatsoever.
Nice. I was last there in 2019, so it's been a while for me. But I had a good experience when I was
Portland's
there, too.
It's a beautiful, beautiful city.
Really is,
Oregon in general. Just everything's green all the time.
Did you notice it? I think Portland, though, like more so than any city, and I think somebody there validated this for me, but I noticed it, just an observation, has more modes of public transportation just based on the city than anywhere else. Like they have like a subway system. They have like light rail. They have a bus system.
They do.
They have those overhead like cable car things. Did you see that? Like that.
There's just trails and rails everywhere.
Like
which I have to say, I hate. Every person on a bike, I freaking hate.
Okay, I'm not a fan of bikers.
Yeah, I can't stand. Are you staying in your bike lane? You're not paying attention. You don't follow the same rules of the road I do in my car. How am I supposed to treat you as a bike? I'd like to just run your ass down.
Have you ever been to Amsterdam?
No.
More bikers than anywhere in the world?
Hate it.
Bikers have like the right of way, and the thing is, like, as a pedestrian,
they do,
like,
and they abuse that right all the time.
There are bikers that are literally flying right by you, and if you like just step out of like the pedestrian lane, which is like this narrow, just slightly, like you risk being run over by a biker. I mean, there are some like close calls there. There's been some collisions.
Now, how many times? And so those bikers pay attention to all the rules, and they don't. They run just like red lights. I really, really dislike bikes. But Portland and Oregon in general is not the blue hellhole that it's made out to be.
Yeah, I love the Pacific Northwest. Like, it really is beautiful. And for those that haven't been to Portland or to Oregon itself, like I want to make a trip out of the Oregon coast, like Cannon Beach. Like if you've
we
seen
were just there.
Photos. Oh, okay,
awesome.
You went there too. Okay.
We saw the Goonies rock.
Oh yes, that's what I want to see. Yeah.
And Cannon Beach is probably a quarter mile or more wide. It's a massive beach. So there's lots of places to walk. Cannon Beach was awesome. Cannon Beach, and there's a place, Seaside, that's like 15 or 20 minutes for it on the Oregon coast.
Oh, okay.
A little more touristy. That would be a great time. That would be a great time, too.
Yeah, I had always been curious about the Oregon beaches because I never hear about them compared to everywhere else.
It was 57 degrees, right? But that's just where it is. Brendan, last week we had some technical difficulties on the pod. The pod just kind of ended because we had like a short in our soundboard or something.
It also just started. Like we didn't have our intro
just started
either.
Because we just started talking. The next time we pod will be the 200th episode of the podcast.
Oh,
and I think we have to have Mike back.
We do. That is a marquee episode.
Every 100 episodes, Mike comes back. So we'll reach out to Mike and see if he has interest in pod with us.
That'll be a fun one.
We've been doing this for 6 years.
It's crazy to think it's been that long. It doesn't feel like it.
That's unbelievable. But I don't know. We still have people that listen to it. I still get text and phone calls from people.
I do too, yeah. People that I didn't even know listen to it, like reach out to me. I'm like,
when we've taken breaks before, I've had people I haven't seen in years will send me a text and say, are you doing it or are you done? So we have a small but loyal following. So yeah, we're getting the next episode will be the 200th Spectacular. We'll have to come up with something special for that.
We will. We'll have to have a special theme for that too, yeah.
Well, our theme is Little Debbie's.
Oh, okay.
You need to go back and listen to the 100th episode where Mike showed up with a full bag of Little Debbie's.
Oh, okay.
And we spent 40 minutes of us just eating and talking.
That's always good.
Should we have 2 mics for 3 people or 3 mics? Because last time we had 2 mics and it kind of worked because it kept the third person out of the loop.
Yeah. I'd probably do 3.
We'll probably go 3 just to see.
So then you don't just have that awkward like collision happening with 2 people
around. Like, we've done that multiple times.
I remember it being like that last time. Yeah.
All right, that's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.